You are back at the Amplified Action Podcast. Andre and Jake here. As always, we are going to be breaking down a very important skill set to have because we all like to have discipline, be consistent. We all know that's the foundation of being successful and making progress in our life. But the reality of it is we all fall off. So this podcast is all about how can you regain lost momentum. So you've been moving forward in life, you've been crushing goals, something happens, right? It always happens. It could be a big thing, it could be a small thing, you could get sick. That's the one that always gets me. Like I can look back at how many times I've disrupted productive routines because I got sick for a week or something, or sick kids. So this is something I'm really passionate about because for me personally, I think this was one of the biggest things that stopped me. I've always been a very driven person, and I can smash my face into the wall for hours and I'm very disciplined, but that discipline only lasts for like a certain period of time. And then I get thrown off and I don't come back to it. So this has been something that's been really personal to me that I've had to debug myself. So we have 3 actionable tips that we're going to boil this down to. Is how do you regain lost momentum? Before we dive in, I'll just kick it over to you, Andre. Do you have any thoughts to start us off?
Yeah, momentum and trajectory are pretty much everything. Like discipline and consistency just support that. It is a piece of the overall picture of making sure that you get things done and have momentum. I think that they're just tools. They're probably the most valuable tools we have, but they are tools. So there's more that goes into actually getting things done and maintaining momentum and trajectory than just those 2 things. And like, it's number one is having the discipline and momentum because it keeps us the discipline and consistency because it keeps us from having to go through the whole restarting the routine thing, which is much more challenging than keeping it going, right? So I think that's our first one is don't lose the momentum in the first place.
Yeah, a little bit of a switcheroo here for the first one. We're talking about regaining lost momentum, but like the first thing is just don't lose it in the first place. That is the most efficient way to do it for sure. And we could probably do a whole episode on this just on itself because there's so many tactics you can use here. But one, we all like to think we're going to do good in the future. I call this future think. We're always really like, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to form this habit and do this. And we generally look optimistic on the future, depending on how some people go the other way. But if you're listening to a podcast about self-growth, I don't know, you're probably looking to grow and you're probably inspired and wanting to be a better person. And it's really easy to think that I'll just do it because you have this motivation in the moment and it seems simple. But the reality of it is it's hard to stick with things long term. So having a fallback, a tool that you can fall back on, or a system that you can fall back on in those low moments of discipline or energy is really key. And I think one of the biggest ways you can do this is through having some sort of external accountability. So that could just be a friend, it could be a coach, a mentor, whatever you want to be. Like even something like this podcast, right? There's 2 of us here. Like if I don't show up one day to the podcast, like I show up because I know you're going to show up and we're in this together. So we're like unspoken accountability partners for like pushing this ship forward. And another example would be, I like exercise for me. I enjoy exercise. I've had really good routines, but I always seem to fall off. But about a year and a half ago, I hired a coach, it was through an app, and I just text with him back and forth. Dude, I don't miss workouts at all because I have to explain why I missed it, right? I have to go to my coach and be like, oh, I can't do it, which I do sometimes. Stuff comes up, kid gets sick, I get sick, but I get back on the wagon afterwards. Yes, I may be knocked out with whatever, a cold for a week, but like I get my ass up and I go to work and I get the workout done because I know my coach is going to be like, what, are you just not working out anymore? Like, what are you doing? And that's changed everything for me, just that external accountability. And I don't need it all the time, but man, when I do need it, it changes everything.
Yeah. I mean, so don't lose it through community, basically. Like any kind of relationship or community. It can be like a business partner, just a friend, a community, getting a coach. Any of those things all do effectively the same thing. You have to explain why you're not executing, and like no one wants to do that. That's like a it's a part of your identity to like look good to people. Like that's a human thing. You need to look good to people, and it's much easier to not have to explain why you're not doing it, and then having them prompt you after you've fallen off the wagon is super valuable. Like there's not a whole lot extra to be said here, but external accountability is super powerful for getting you back on the wagon and keeping you on it. Like the break is not going to be more than 1 or 2 days if you have to like text back and forth with a coach or text back and forth with a friend. Like if you have an actual like lifting partner, they're going to be like, bro, where the fuck were you? like, like, it's just, it's super valuable. Like if you can find a way to have that happen, do it.
Right. That leads right into the second tip we have here, which is just show up, make small steps. And this is really what external accountability does. Like you don't want to do it, but it pushes you to at least get moving, at least get something done. That is most of the battle for most things, is just showing up and getting started, and the momentum will pick up. And one actionable thing that I think we've talked about on other episodes before too is stolen from James Clear, and he talks about the 2 minute rule. So like he talks about forming new habits, but I think this works for anything really. Is just boil it down to a smaller thing. So you got to go for a run, just go run for 2 minutes. Just put your shoes on, get out the door for 2 minutes. If you really don't feel like continuing after 2 minutes, then just stop. That's okay. Like you still showed up and you did it, and that means maybe there really was real resistance in your life and you just couldn't do it today. But chances are, if you just sit down, you open up the laptop, you open up the program, whatever you're trying to do and accomplish, if you just get going for 2 minutes, it's going to turn into an hour.
Just showing up is really, really important in all kinds of different things. And we're talking about exercise. We talked about running, right? For me right now, my lifting routine is in shambles, right? I haven't been able to do it because I've been the time slot that I would normally lift has been crowded out by other things. So what I do is I have two compound movements. That's all I require of myself. And honestly, that's most of the time all I do, but occasionally I'll add more. And it's just about dropping the barrier to action. That's the real thing, is dropping the barrier to action. The other thing that I have is I somewhat impulse bought one of those echo bikes, the ones with the sprinty ones, the ones
Yeah,
that
yeah,
you
I know
see
those.
in
I've had
in
my eyes on those before. Yeah.
uh bomb ass bike, by the way. I do recommend. It is pricey, but it's really good. And like literally I will finish my task and be like, oh, I don't feel like doing the next one. And then I go downstairs and I like bang out 30 seconds, right? And like that, those things are super effective. And the minimum dose is like 30 seconds, like legitimately 30 seconds, right? And like for the next like few minutes, and I'm a little out of shape right now, but for the next few minutes, my heart rate's elevated. That's not nothing, right? Just the small things, and then like it becomes easier to do the big things, right? It's just you get practice overcoming inertia, which is really important. Get practice overcoming the inertia, make the activation energy as small as possible, and you're going to end up reforming those habits quicker.
Right on. That perfect segue to tip number 3 we have here, which is reframe. Aim for progress, not perfection. So if your definition of success is I do 20 different exercises and I do it for an hour and 15 minutes or whatever, um, you're you're probably going to fail more often, especially on the days when you don't feel like showing up or you don't feel like doing it. If you just embrace the imperfection of it, if you just focus on incremental improvement, building those pathways in your brain, the getting the to feel automatic and getting in the rhythm and the routine, reframe your success metrics to that, because this is a long-term game, right? Like sure, maybe there's some things where it's like, okay, really got to show up and I got to do this for an hour because it's very specific. But like most of these things, when we're talking about self-development, self-growth, these are lifelong pursuits, or at least for a decent period of time. And you don't want to burn yourself out. Like take a long-term approach. Exercise is, we talk about that a lot just because it's such a perfect example, and it's such a it amplifies everything in your life when you're, when you get your blood moving. Um, it's a long-term play. We're going here, right? Like you don't want to burn yourself out.
First of all, every time you say amplify, I smile because of the podcast name, and I can't help it. But yeah,
We did it
so
for a
like
reason. It's a good word. It's an
it's
excellent word.
yeah, I love that word. I love that word. I look for amplification anywhere I can. But yeah, so like I agree that that kind of is the whole heart of making sure that we do the thing, is taking a long term like time frame. Like just focusing on progress instead of perfection is something that we could all do better, because everybody thinks, oh, it's a waste of time if I don't do the whole thing. You don't need to be that optimized. If you optimize for just showing up, that's probably the only optimization you need, because there's a big difference between a 15-minute lifting routine that happens nearly every day and a 2-hour routine that happens every other week. Like huge difference, both in results and in whether or not you're going to completely fall off, right? It's just manage your activation energy, focusing on the progress, make sure that you're making small incremental improvements all the time. That's like the heart of improving your life, because it's over a lifetime. You need to be thinking over a longer stretch, and that just changes the importance of small wins done consistently to just be so much more valuable.
Right. We don't win every time. Our job is to show up and create the conditions for magic to happen. You are not required to perform magic every single time. But if you put yourself in the position enough times consistently, magic happens. That's just how it works. And that's the way to reframe it. That's the way I frame it in my life. And I think it's been a huge game changer for me, is you just got to show up and let things play out. You're not going to win them all. Those were the 3 tips. So we have don't lose it. Don't lose it in the first place. External accountability is a really good tool for that. We have just show up, take small steps, 2-minute rule, build that muscle of just overcoming that initial resistance. And then tip 3 is reframe, aim for progress, not perfection. Create the conditions for success to happen. Don't worry about being successful every single time. Just show up. Any other thoughts before we wrap up?
If you create that consistency, that's your success metric. That's the big thing. So make sure that you're creating that consistency and trying to keep that momentum going. That's your success metric, and you get back to it as soon as you can. Ultimately, that's what it's all about.
100%. I love it. All right, short and sweet. Good episode. Thanks everybody. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure go ahead and hit like, subscribe. Love you all. Talk to you later.
All right. Thanks, guys.